Welcome to ArtSpeak University. This is the half an hour every week here at ArtSpeak where someone from ArtSpeak teaches something at ArtSpeak. And if you're in the community, we want to welcome you into this time. Today, we have Jonathan Meyer teaching us the magic of the internet world. I'm not sure exactly how he's titling this talk, but I'm going to toss it to him to take it from here.
Great question, Kirk. Thanks for the intro. For those of you who I've met, you already know who I am. For those of you maybe watching the community, or even those of you on the team that I haven't met yet, my name's Jonathan, and I oversee kind of all of the website projects that come through ArtSpeak, from strategy, design, development, kind of have my hands in all of the things. So today we're just going to talk through essentially some guidelines and best practices for web design and usability. So I'm gonna share my screen. Everybody see that? Okay, perfect. So Bella asked me to do this like probably months ago, and I didn't really decide on what to even talk about until probably sometime late last week. So bear with me there, but I just want to talk through some of the best practices that I'm aware of that are kind of industry standard, as well as try and relate that back to some of the areas in our website process. So yeah, let's jump in. So there's 9 things that I chose to kind of focus on. One of those being user centricity, simplicity, visual hierarchy, navigability, which didn't realize that was a word until I was doing some research for this, consistency, responsivity, accessibility, conventionality, and credibility. A lot of IDs. So we're going to jump in to user centricity. One of the main things that we try to do at ArtSpeak and when designing a website, this is true for our branding, our messaging, really any of our processes, is putting ourselves in the mind and shoes of our target audience. So one of the things that we focus on in our messaging process specifically is helping our clients kind of get at and discover who their target audience is. So typically when a client comes through our ArtSpeak website process, they've already gone through messaging and branding. So we have a general idea of who that target audience they're trying to reach is. So we can kind of run all of our website strategy and design decisions through some of those filters. Some of the key points though that to focus on in kind of the user centricity realm would be designing with the end user in mind. So again, you know, is it young families that are going to be using your website? Is this website for parents with small children? You know, is this a city museum website? Is this a kids play place? Or is this for a church that, you know, specifically reaches young families or 20 somethings? Tailor the user's experience by utilizing personalized content. I think we'll see probably an uptick in this over the next coming years. I think we're not quite there yet where everyone, you know, in their grandma's website, it has personalized content specifically for, you know, that user. This would require a lot from kind of a web perspective where, you know, the user has to engage with your website in order to know what content to serve them up. So typically you would see this in something like an app, and you see this every day. If you're on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, you know, you have your personalized feeds, but I think there will be kind of a trend where we see this happen more seamlessly on, you know, standard websites too. And then back to messaging, you know, we just want to create messaging and visuals geared to relate to that target audience. So again, just filtering everything through, you know, who am I trying to reach? Does this resonate with them? Doesn't really matter what you feel about it. Obviously, when we're designing websites for clients, we want the client to like it, but ultimately our end goal is to make sure that the end user is the one that, you know, converts, or, you know, that we get through and cut through the noise too. So ways to improve your user centricity on your website: conduct user testing. You know, you can get a development site up and have people start using it. Preferably people who are, you know, one step removed from the project. If you're the one designing and developing the site, you're generally too close. So having people who have not seen the site before or maybe don't understand all of the specifics and logistics that go into this site, having them use it, asking them about their experience, where were some of the hurdles, what did they like, how did it make them feel, all of those things. Next, tracking specific data. Google Analytics is pretty industry standard. There's some other analytics platforms out there like Fathom, and there's different services like Hotjar that provides you with heat maps and scroll maps. So you get a real kind of sense of how people are utilizing your website. Google Analytics is great for numbers and kind of data, but Hotjar and a free alternative called Mouseflow, they will give you actual, heat maps of where people are clicking at on your site or how far down they've scrolled on your site. So those are great options to collect information about your, how people are already using your website. And I will say, rebranding, well, sorry, not rebranding, but redesigning a website is a lot more challenging than designing a fresh website. You've got years, months, maybe even decades of history of people using that website and these expectations that website has set that you have to combat with, or not necessarily give in, but work with. So again, one other way to do this to improve your user-centered focus on your website is to just interview somebody from your target audience. It's as easy as that. What do they like about websites? What kind of websites do they frequent? What are they looking for when they come to a website like yours? Great way to get some real feedback and potentially foster some relationships too. So we'll jump into some examples. This is Lifebrook, one of our current clients. They're just a current website that we're working on. So this example A is their previous sermon page. You can see we've got all of these categorized by series and displayed as such. So power of words, difficult proverbs. And then this is kind of their in development website that we're working on. But here is the new sermon archive or watch page, where right up at the top, we're feeding them the latest message, which they've done here. But we're adding a little bit more context in here, where we're saying, this is the message, it's from this series, it's got this speaker. We've got links for them to view more from the series or to go and view all series. And then we've got a countdown to their next online gathering. And then kind of the major update here that I'd love to focus on is we're providing the user with the ability to filter and sort through and find specific content geared towards what they're interested in. Maybe they're coming to the site fresh, they've never interacted with Lifebrook at all, but maybe they want to find a certain passage, or maybe they want to search for a certain topic like hope, love, marriage, and if there's anything relevant in Lifebrook's sermon archive, that will get served up. So that's one way to kind of, in essence, curate and personalize content by providing the ability for the user to kind of manually do so themselves. All right. So next one, simplicity. It's really that simple. Just keep it simple. Obviously, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the KISS principle. There are very varying ways to say this. I chose keep it simple, silly. That is the challenge, though. The simplicity, it's very difficult to not overcomplicate, to not overthink, and to really just try to involve your own experiences and backgrounds and ego into it a lot. So one of the ways to kind of deal with that is, again, going back to that user-centered focus, just putting yourself in the user's shoes, asking yourself. It works a lot better if you have some sort of persona to work from. If you have a specific person that you've done some research on and you understand their likes, their needs, their hopes and wants and fears, you can kind of put yourself in their shoes a lot easier and run things through those filters. Again, just choosing clarity over complexity. So anytime that you have the ability to clarify, maybe what an interaction is going to do or what an interaction on the website is going to look like. If there's, say, a form submission, adding some description or some context that says, leave us a message and we'll get back to you within 24 hours, or tell us what you're looking for, and so from that department will get back in touch with you. Anytime that you can provide some of those extra little details, I think they go a long way in establishing credibility and helping build that trust and relationship with your user. And we'll touch on credibility a little bit later. One way to keep things simple is to practice the DRY principle. If you're not familiar with the DRY principle, it's primarily found in web development, but it stands for do not repeat yourself. That's one way that we kind of tend to think about from both a design perspective and a development perspective. If I've already done this once, I shouldn't repeat myself and rework, reimagine, reinvent the wheel all over again just for this specific page. So if an accordion section looks one way on one page, then it might make sense for it to look the same on a different page, unless there's some additional context or things that we need to take into consideration there. Ways to improve. So don't use too many colors. There's a 60-30-10 rule that's originally found in interior design, but it's been adopted for user interface design. And so 60% of your color should be kind of a strong neutral color. And then 30% would be kind of a primary color. So this for your brand could be a strong primary color that could be, it could also be neutral. It could have a little bit more warmth or coolness to it, depending on the brand expression. And then the 10 would be your accent. So any interactions, any do something with me, I'm a link, click on me, you're going to go somewhere, I want you to look at this thing, would be that 10. Everything else kind of takes a little bit of a background seat to the 10. Opt for legible typefaces. I think that's pretty standard and clear. Obviously, dealing with type in print and dealing with type in web are a bit different. You have things to consider like retina devices. You have people's, displays are different and render text differently. Even the browsers render text differently. So all of those things are a little bit harder to track, but anytime you can, lean into a typeface that's pretty legible, unless there's a really good reason, or it's not important information. If it's mostly decorative information, then feel free to use that script or that shotgun ambulance you want to use. Don't ask too much of the user or provide too many options. So there is such a thing as option overload or option overwhelm. When you do provide options, you want to keep it to a minimum and also make sure those options are relevant regarding the context of where that user is at on your website. And then finally, guide the user by way of visual cues or messaging to where you want them to go. I think this is pretty standard too, but as you're going down a website, there's generally some sort of flow to the content. Obviously, all of our websites, we want the user to do something when they get there, whether that's plan a visit or leave us a message or, request a free consultation call. There's some end goal for us that we want the user to do. So how can you lead them through in a simple, straightforward way? So this is UDC, or University of District of Columbia. This is their current website. I don't know about you guys. Feel free to let me know in the chat, but I get option overload simply just by looking at this. And this is just a JPEG of their site. There's a ton of colors happening here, which they are a very colorful brand in some regards. They have a lot of diversity and different things like that. But just looking at this, I don't really know what is the link and what is not. It's kind of unclear. And then you wouldn't guess, but these are actually images. So that none of that text is clickable. That's just an image, but it's made to look like it's clickable on the site. And then this is, again, Lifebrook, primarily just because it's relevant and one I've been working on recently. But as you can see, we're kind of practicing that 60-30-10 rule. We have a strong kind of neutral presence between the dark purplish color, the white, and then we've got the 10 being practiced in a lot of those accent colors. And I think it just makes for overall a much more confident look and feel when we're practicing, simple colors like that, or simple utilization of colors. So visual hierarchy. Key points to focus on. This is, again, fairly standard. If you have any experience with design, a lot of this applies to print design or, book design, brochure design, really just focusing in on making sure that your hierarchy is intact and makes sense. So arrange and organize elements so that visitors gravitate towards the most important elements first. The goal of, a website or a landing page or a specific page on the site is obviously to lead a user to complete some sort of desired action. But you want to do so in a way that feels natural and is enjoyable for them, not something that is complicated or causes them to have to click, 5, 6, 7 times. And again, don't repeat yourself. I think that applies through just about all of these. Ways to improve your visual hierarchy. So use strong indicators like color, interactivity, or animation to draw the user's attention to where you want them to go. Make sure your your typographic hierarchy makes sense. There's resources like typescale.com, which will help you kind of put together a typographic scale. Maybe you're not a designer, maybe you got tasked with, editing or building or redesigning your church's website and you don't have a strong design background. There are tools out there that can help you, like Typescale. Again, don't ask too much of the user, and then guide the user using those visual cues. So whether those are highlights or underlines on specific pieces of text, whether the inline links are colored differently than the rest of the body, or maybe they're colored the same, but they just have an underlying text decoration, so that the user knows, hey, this is something to click on. We're going to jump to Pinterest's website. I found this example earlier this morning and liked it. So Pinterest, as you can see, we've got the brand colors highlighting both the logo, and then their primary desired action is, log in or sign up. But then I like this where we've got kind of this rotating headline that's get your next blank, whatever they think you might want to do. And then all of these kind of UI elements here are colored for that specific idea. So when this idea changes, the dots here on the image slider changes or carousel changes. And then this call to action here that's saying, hey, scroll down and find your new look or outfit is all colored based on that, which I thought was really nice and ties it together. It lets me know, or lets the user know, hey, this is all geared towards this one action. Whereas up here, this is geared towards, a separate or a different action. So I thought that was nice. Should have installed a back button on those pages. Navigability, yes. All right, so the goal is to help users find what they're looking for. We talked on that a little bit prior. Obviously, when they come to the site, we want them to do something, but we also want to make sure that it's easy for them to do something. We don't want to bury things too deep, which is the next point. We want everything to be within 1 to 3 clicks deep, and that means pages primarily. So if there's a page on your site, you shouldn't be burying it 4, 5, 6 links deep. That I don't know that anybody in this day and age has the patience to click through 6 web pages to find out all of the information. The labels and location of your navigation should remain the same on every page. One of the points that we'll touch on briefly is conventionality. And that just says primarily that there's a lot of conventions that we've come to be accustomed to with websites. Essentially, everybody here is an internet expert. We all explore and use the internet daily. And so by doing so, are expectations and standards that we've gotten used to. And so rather than going against the grain there, leaning into that. So that's kind of what that point is about, making sure that labels and location of your navigation don't change from page to page. Basically, one of the things that I find the most important with web design is kind of pattern recognition. We're either recognizing patterns in data or information and building templates from them, or we're working to establish patterns for our users to recognize so that they can kind of glean or grok the information more quickly. So that is one thing to kind of focus on. And if we're changing that from page to page, that can cause, excess cognitive load. And again, option overwhelm. We don't want to offer too many navigation options. That's why all of our ArtSpeak sites, we have, kind of our primary navigation here where we want to focus on. These are maybe the 3 to 5 things that we really want somebody to do, but then we have some other areas for navigation like in the hamburger menu where we can pull out and say, like, this is all of the offerings that this church has for you. Feel free to find what you want. So let's jump to consistency. Consistency kind of harps on that point too, just keeping things consistent. So keeping things like background colors, typefaces, tone of your writing, keeping all of those things consistent can have a positive impact on your website's usability and user experience. So this goes into one thing that we work really hard at with our websites is to create layouts or views or templates. There's lots of different words for that, for specific types of pages. So one of the things that I do when we get a new client website coming through, I go and look at their site and I kind of take note of, okay, they've got messages, they've got events, they've got groups. Those are kind of 3 different content types. And then they've got all of their information pages. And then maybe they have these kind of landing pages for these specific one-off things. Those again are kind of a different content type. And so taking note of different content types and then planning accordingly, you know, whether we're going to design a template specific for those things or how is some sort of framework for those. By keeping consistency in visual hierarchy and layout, you make it easy for users to understand. So that goes back to some of the stuff I mentioned in that last slide. Ways to improve this: decide early on what types of content and information you'll be presenting. Consider creating a template for each specific content type. Don't repeat yourself. You know, if the FAQ section on this page for kids looks almost identical to the one on the home page, you should keep it as such. And then, yeah, I think that's an artifact of a template. So this is Lifebrook's events page. So each event has its own template. It pulls in the same information. We've got the event title, the event date, time, and then, you know, here's the call to action to register. And if there are event details, the event details display. If there are not event details, then this column centers with just the event location information. So trying to kind of plan accordingly for all of the different use cases or edge cases that might happen. Responsivity, also known as just responsive design. Basically, your website has to work with whatever device your user is using. That goes back to the first point of user-centric design. You know, if they're using a cell phone, we want your website to work on the cell phone. Just some quick stats: mobile devices, not tablets, counted for 57% of web page views worldwide, and 93% of people have left the website because it didn't display properly on their device. So when designing, it's best to start with mobile first. Usually, you want to think through how your content is going to be resized or reshuffled to fit the dimensions of whatever device a visitor is using. And then ultimately, it's more important to provide a great experience versus having everything look the same or consistent across devices. Ways to improve this: you can learn about mobile stacking order and media queries if you're interested in kind of CSS and web development. That just kind of indicates how things will stack when responsive web design takes place. Test across browsers and devices. There are a couple tools listed there for that. If this is a pre-existing site, you know, track those things. Track how people are using your website. You know, 57% of global web page views may have been on mobile, but that doesn't mean that that's 57% of your website page views. Maybe your audience is using desktop. And then utilize CSS frameworks like Foundation, Bootstrap, Tailwind to take care of and account for that mobile responsiveness. Accessibility is a huge topic, so I don't have time to touch on all of the things here, but kind of the key points are to make a website that anyone can use. There are tons of people with disabilities or limitations that affect how they browse a website. People use screen readers, like people with color blindness or visual impairments. So accessibility applies to your entire site, from the underlying HTML structure to the page format, visuals, and both written and visual content. And the WCAG guidelines state websites must be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And there's a little bit more info there, but running low on time. So jump to some examples. This is just a quick example of how colorblind people view websites. So this is the default layout, which I imagine most of us probably view this as such. But then there are 3 different kind of colorblind visual impairments, and this is how they see those colors. So knowing this, we may want to go back and rethink how we're using the color palette here. Or another option could be, maybe there's a little pop-up that says, hey, do you have a visual impairment like, I'm going to butcher this, tritanopia? If so, like click this, and maybe it injects a different CSS style sheet that colors things differently. There's different options there. Conventionality, we touched on this briefly earlier. There are obviously conventions that you want to stick within and not fight against, unless there's a really good reason to. I would say there are reasons or times to kind of push boundaries, but typically it works a lot better and reduces cognitive load if we're just kind of working within the expectations of what our user anticipates. If we violate what they anticipate, that could cause them, some frustration or some uncomfortableness with using our website, which may reflect poorly on, you or your client as an organization. FreshBooks, for example. So credibility, specifically kind of geared towards building trust, establishing trust, the relationship with your users. So sticking to web conventions, back to the last slide, works towards that. I think being clear and honest about whatever it is you hope to convey to the user, being upfront, not bearing the lead, and just being clear and communicating, what we want them to do when they get there and why we think it's beneficial to them, what we think they can get out of it and what's in it for them. So ways to improve this is, obviously don't make users dig for information about your service or product. I was on a website the other day for a coffee roaster. There were 6 pages to find all of the information about the one product. Granted, I'm very interested in this coffee roaster, so I clicked through all 6 pages, but if I had no interest in it, I wouldn't have clicked through. But there was a page for specifications, a page for pricing, a page for, attachments, and clicking through all of those things was kind of annoying. So we don't want to do that. Organize your info in a logical way and utilize internal links to help users find what they need. A lot of it is anticipating the user's needs, where we want them to go, where we think they might want to go after this, and trying to plan for that. I think using an SSL certificate is another great step. Even if you aren't capturing private or important information, it does signify, hey, this is a real website. We care about your information, so we're going to take this extra step. And then be upfront about letting users know what kind of info you're tracking. So you'll see on a lot of websites you visit now, those end user license agreements or the cookie consent banners that say, hey, we're tracking this info. You can either accept all of these or modify these, or if you don't want to be tracked at all, please don't use our website. So those are some different ways to help establish credibility. Any questions? That pretty much covers all of the things in a nutshell.
Wow. Thank you. Incredible.
Also,
Also, wow. I did have a fancy question slide, but I didn't plan accordingly, apparently, and put a link to it. So here we go. Questions, anything? So we got 2 minutes left. So if there are no questions, then you can have 2 minutes back to your day. But if you do have questions, feel free to let me know. Or as always, you can DM me in the ArtSpeak Slack or the ArtSpeak community Slack. So always happy to have a conversation.
Thanks,
So
John.
super helpful, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, bigger
Thanks.
question, thinking about this. What part does the pre-work, the strategy part of what you do play into these 9 things, especially, I think maybe we could say credibility and consistency?
The strategy, I think a lot of it for me comes down to that, the first slide of user-centric. So just thinking through, like, if I was a user, if I was using this website, like, what are the things that I would hope to see, want to find from a credible site or from a brand. But then, yeah, it's definitely a challenge thinking through that and then applying how our brand team puts together these different brands and kind of these different realms and it's one thing to design church websites and only church websites, but then you have different websites for businesses or leaders or organizations. There's all sorts of things that you have to take into consideration there. But a lot of that, I think, primarily comes from taking into account what they're already doing and trying to think through, how keeping what's good about it, and then thinking through kind of where are these gaps or where they may be missing in some of these criteria, and trying to help that along. Most of that tends to go over pretty well and is received well, but generally there's pushback because, again, as I mentioned previously, if it's a redesign, you've got years and years, potentially decades of just history that you're kind of combating against, where, well, we've always done it this way, or we've always had this information available. So I think that presents its own challenges, and that's just kind of an ongoing conversation with the client, and being upfront and clear and helping them try to understand why we think we should do it this way. And at the end of the day, if they want to go that path, great, and if not, I'm not gonna twist their arm. So we will work within the confines of what they're willing to do.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Fantastic stuff, Jonathan. Hey, if there's other questions, ideas, thoughts, let's keep that discussion going. Let's do it in the ArtSpeak Creative Community Slack, and look for the university channel there, and let's keep that conversation going. Again, Jonathan, fantastic. I think you win the award for best presentation.
Maybe.
But also fantastic content. So much there. Thanks to everyone for being here.